So good to be with you. I know some of you have walked through Discovering Christ the last 7-8 weeks. Deacon Frank and some of the other team members. Some of you, though, may just be starting out tonight. Some of you have been in RCIA in the past and are rejoining the group to finish it off. So we all come kind of to this room tonight on different paths and trajectories. RCIA is always fascinating. Do we explain what RCIA stands for?
Yes.
Okay. So, Christian Initiation of Adults. You might just call it CIA for short. Where are you going, honey? CIA. CIA. Can't tell you about it. But it's adults being initiated deeper into Christianity, into the Catholic faith. We would say that Catholic and Christian mean the same thing. Sometimes people say, "Are you a Christian?" You're like, "I'm a Catholic." "Oh, I thought so you're not a Christian." "No, I am a Christian. I'm a Catholic. I'm definitely a Christian. I definitely believe Jesus Christ." But sometimes those terms are used as different. You're either Catholic or you're Christian. They mean the same thing. Christian means you're a follower of Jesus Christ. Catholics are followers of Jesus Christ. Christians disagree on what Jesus taught and what's the best way to follow him. But anyone who believes that Jesus is God, in a certain sense, is a Christian. What we're going to talk about between now and Easter are, what does it mean to be a Christian? What are different elements of that? And maybe not all Christians agree on those elements. But we're going to explain the Catholic understanding of Christianity, which is very beautiful, and it's very deep, and it's very bold. But we're also going to do it together. We're going to hear each other's perspectives and each other's questions. And some of us know a lot about Jesus Christ, or a lot about the Bible, and some of us don't, and that's okay. And some of us are baptized Catholics but never really learned our faith. Or we're going deeper, we want to get confirmation. Some of us are baptized Protestant Christians who know a lot about Jesus Christ and the Scripture. Some of us have never been baptized Christian, and we're learning more. So it's always a fascinating mix of people that show up to the RCIA process every year. Like, God, who are we going to bring? And what are we going to learn from each other? I wish everybody would do what we're doing here tonight. Most of us learn religion when we're young, when we're not interested. How many of you loved going to school when you were growing up? When you were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? I love getting up on Monday morning when it's raining and it's 25 degrees and getting on the school bus. I just love doing that. Nobody loves that. And then you learn religion, you're like, whatever. To a degree, right? Hopefully you had some interest, but once you're an adult and you've been tempted and you've seen suffering and you've seen bad people progressing in life and good people falling behind in life, and you see young children who are sick, and you see wars in Ukraine, and you see questions about gender and questions about sexuality, and then you come to RCIA, you're like, I got a lot of questions. I'm really interested. How does this all work? And how does this make sense? And if there was a God, where is he? So please ask questions. It'd be the dumbest thing in the world if you came here every night for an hour and a half every week until May and didn't get your questions answered. That'd be really dumb. When are you going to ask your questions if not when you're here? So please don't feel that your questions take the conversation off track. It's on track for you. Now, we might say, you know what, we're going to talk about that next week. But remember that question, write it down, and make sure you ask it again next week. We're not blowing you off, right? This will be interesting to the extent that you ask questions. The more questions you ask, I think the more interested you're going to be. But I think the others are interested in your questions too. And the question you ask, probably 10 other people have that same question. So there aren't bad questions. Even if you're like, I don't get that, or I'm really struggling to accept that, Father. Okay, let's talk about it. We want you to wrestle with these. We don't want you to come to Easter and say, well, these 3 Catholic things I don't agree with. If you don't agree with them, let's talk about them. And sometimes maybe it needs to be a one-on-one session with myself, or Deacon Frank, or Marcy, or Seminarian Tommy, or Dr. Rich, or Tracy. We're here to walk. You're your sponsors. Let's get those questions out. There's some fascinating questions in the world today. I would say we've never been as technologically advanced in the world as we are today, and we've never been more confused about what it means to be human. Yeah, you got cool phones, we don't even know who we are. And so ask questions. Don't hesitate to do that. So, let's see, how many have not done Discovering Christ? You're not getting in trouble. Okay, all right, so a few, right? So for those who are doing Discovering Christ, we were talking about, is there a God? How do you know there's God? Is Jesus God? How do we know Jesus is God? If there is a God, can you even connect with him? Like, does he even care? And if you can connect, how do you connect? How do you pray? How does prayer work? And so some of those discussions have occurred. We're going to revisit those topics, but some have been pondering them and discussing them the last few weeks. Tonight is more basic, what is faith and belief anyway? And if there is a God, how do you pray? What is prayer? Next week, we're going to talk a little bit, Tommy's going to talk about the Bible, like the good book. It's a big book, but we're going to introduce it next week. Again, some of you have a lot of knowledge of it, some don't, that's fine. The following week, I believe we're going to go back to that basic topic of who is Jesus again. Even though we did discuss it in Discovering Christ, we're going to revisit. And that's the most important topic, who is Jesus. Right? We know God through Jesus. We're going to celebrate Christmas. It's the biggest party on planet Earth. It is the biggest party on planet Earth. It's Christmas. I feel really sad for those who aren't Christian who kind of look from the outside in on our celebrating. But that is the most important question. Who is Jesus? God who came to earth. Can that be true? And if it was so, what are the implications of that? So, would you describe the books a little bit?
A little bit. I showed it to them, and kind of just said that we're going to be going through it.
Good.
We did not break it open.
Right. Now, don't be intimidated. We just put 3 big books down in front of you. Okay? Most people don't read the entire Bible cover to cover. Very few people do that. Some do. Most people don't read the entire catechism cover to cover. Some people do, but most don't. This is a summary of the catechism. You're like, summary, Father? It's 426 pages. But it's the catechism in like layman's terms, bringing it down into more common language. The catechism is readable, but it's written for everybody. It's written for RCIA candidates. It's written for Catholics who have been practicing the faith for 20 years. It's written for priests. It's written for theologians. It's written for bishops. So parts of this you're going to understand better, and parts you're going to understand less, and that's okay. It's just, this is the official summary of the Catholic faith. We say there's 2 good books. There's the Bible is the good book, right? But the Catechism is the other good book. Now this is in a sense more important, because this is the revealed Word of God. But this helps us understand the Bible. This is the application of the Bible to real life, to modern life. So this is kind of an explanation of the Bible. So they complement each other, right? Almost every single page of the Catechism, every single page, has references to the Bible. It's not like a separate book. It's an explanation of the Bible. So that's a good way to think of these 2 books. There really is no other religion that has as comprehensive an explanation of their religion as the Catholic Church. We're like, this is what we believe. We'll stand by it. We'll write it. You can challenge us. You can ask questions. You can say, where's that in the Bible? And we'll show you. Right? So, even if you don't read the whole catechism, it's just good to know it's out there. Like, you're not just, it's not blind faith. If you have a question, reference it and look it up. Questions are fair game. So, what we're going to do in the course, as I think Deacon Frank told you, every week we're going to read a chapter of the Gospel of Mark, because that tells us who Jesus is. What did he say and do? But also our topics are going to be referenced in this book, Catholic Christianity, which is a summary of the Catechism in layman's terms. You could also reference those same topics in the Catechism. It's just that I think it's a little bit easier to read in this version. Okay? So don't be overwhelmed by the books. How many pages are in the Bible? 1,400. And we're asking you to read exactly 16 of those pages. So that's not so scary, is it? We're asking you to read that much. You can do it. You can do it. Don't give up. It's like 16 chapters, and each chapter is about a page. So 16 pages, you can read it tonight, or you can read it by Easter. But you can do it, okay? You're not required to read the pages in here that are referenced, but you'll get more out of it if you do. Some like to read more, some like to read less, so don't be intimidated. But if you want to go deeper, there's plenty of room to go deeper, okay? So, what is faith? And if you look in the book, this starts on page 15. A little explanation or discussion of faith from page 16 to 15 to 31. This is about 16 pages. And it's the question of, how do we believe in anything? Like, how did you get here tonight? Like, what prompted you to come? Like, you have you have spiritual questions of some sort that got you here tonight. Now, some of you might have been prompted by friends or by spouses or fiancés, but you've chosen to come. No one's forcing you to come. You know, our parents help us to come to faith. Friends help us to come to faith. Brothers and sisters, maybe. Teachers. If we do come to church, the priest helps us to grow in faith. So we're always helping each other. So faith can be described in many different ways, but basically it's belief in God. I'd like to say in the next, between now and Easter, so that's December, January, February, March, April, 5 months, really. There's 3 basic questions you really need to grapple with. Is there a God? Presumably you believe that because you're here tonight. But still, why do you believe it? Can you articulate it? Can you convince yourself? Are you convinced? So is there a God? Is Jesus God? That's a big question. The world population reached 8 billion 2 weeks ago, Tuesday. Of those 8 billion, about 2.4 billion believe Jesus is God. Which means 5.6 billion don't. Now, that being said, the biggest religion on planet Earth is Christianity. Like, if you look at any other religion, this is the religion that speaks for the majority of people on Earth. There are more Christians than there are Muslims, which is the next biggest religion. There are more Muslims than Hindus, there are more Hindus than Buddhists, but Christianity is the biggest religion on planet Earth. Right? So it is the explanation of God that most people accept. That way of saying it. Now, within Christianity, Catholicism is the biggest group. There's about 1.4, 1.5 billion Catholic Christians, and then about another 900 million Protestant Christians. Now, within Protestant Christian, that's a big term, right? That covers a lot of different people. Orthodox Christians, non-denominational Christians, more traditional denominations like Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian. So, but there's more Christians than any other religion on planet Earth, and there's more Catholic Christians than other Christians. It's just a good thing to know. So, like, you're not the minority here. Where'd you come up with that crazy idea? You're like, dude, that's what most people in the world believe. More people believe that than anything else. So just know you're in good standing by being here, right? These aren't like some strange ideas that a few people, like this little cult in Clarksville. People are like, that's your opinion. Like, that is not my opinion. That is Christian belief shared by 2.4 billion people. Like, that's been around for 2,000 years. It's not like my opinion. So is there a God? Is Jesus God? And then, did Jesus form the Catholic Church? The Catholic religion? All Christians believe that Jesus is God, and that if you're baptized, you're connected to Jesus. You have the presence of God inside of you in your soul. But Catholic Christians believe that Jesus also created a visible church structure before he left. He picked 12 apostles, and he said, as the Father sent me, now I send you. You speak with my authority. I came precisely to create a church, so that when I left, there would be somebody behind to keep bringing me making me present. He said, I will be with you until the end of time. Not in a human body. It's like, I get it. I don't look like God. I look like a Jewish guy, 33 years old, who grew up in Nazareth. But I am God. I'm going to leave. I'm going to ascend back into heaven. But I'm going to remain present on earth in sacramental form. The night before he died, he said, I'm about to leave, but I'm going to give you a new way of keeping me present. I'm going to change bread into myself, into my body. You're not going to understand this, but it's going to be me. I'm going to stay with you through the church. The apostles are going to celebrate the sacraments and make me sacramentally present. They're going to forgive sins with my authority. They're going to make me present in the Eucharist with my authority. So the bishops, the apostles were the first 12 bishops. The bishops today continue to do what they did. They teach with his authority. They interpret the Bible with his authority. They baptize with his authority. They forgive sins with his authority. And they change bread and wine into his body and blood with his authority. That's what Catholic Christians believe. That the church, with Pope Francis and the bishops and our parishes, and the priests and the deacons, continue to bring Jesus. God is still on earth. Like God can you can access him. He's not just, you don't have to think about him. You can actually experience him. That's what Catholic Christians believe. That's what we want you to wrestle with. Is Jesus God? Is there a God? Is Jesus God? And did Jesus form the Catholic Church? And if you can be confident that Jesus formed the Catholic Church, then all those other questions and issues, we're going to talk about them and wrestle with them, but you can kind of be at peace with them. Because if Jesus is speaking through the church, you can trust the teaching. You still want to ask questions and understand the logic behind it, and we don't want you to have a blind faith. But you're never going to figure everything out, because we don't have enough years. Right? Does that make sense? If you can come to believe that, yeah, the church, like Peter and the apostles spoke for Jesus, what they taught you could trust. And the Pope Francis and Archbishop Laurie and Baldwin and the bishops continue to teach for Jesus. So the official church teaching you can trust. That's a big step, isn't it? To have that confidence in the church. So is there a God? Is Jesus God? And Jesus found the Catholic Church. Those are the questions. And then there are questions of faith. Do you believe those things? In a certain sense, you can't prove that there's a God. But there's a heck of a lot of evidence for it. And at a certain point, you make a choice to say, I believe it. How many of you have been to China? Good, nobody. Do you believe there's a China? Have you ever been there? Can you yourself prove that there is a China? There's a ton of evidence, but you've never actually been there, have you? So God, of course, isn't visibly present, self-evidently present on earth. But there's a heck of a lot of evidence for God around us, right? In history, but also happening today, but also in our personal experience. Like, you can experience the presence of God. You can experience in prayer, like the presence of another person there. So it's not just an idea that you choose to accept or not accept, but as you're pursuing that idea, you start to experience God. And then you're like, I know there's a God. How do you know? I just know it. Prove it to me. I can't prove it to you. I can demonstrate it to you, but I know because I've experienced it. And I can't prove my experience to you. But I hope one day you'll experience it too. I hope you'll have an experience when you're praying and all of a sudden you're like, this is real. It might be through like a miracle that God gives you, but usually it's more subtle than that. You're praying, or you're at Mass, or you have a sacrament, and you're like, I just feel goodness inside of me. I feel strength. I feel wisdom and clarity. It's an experience of God. When you're with someone you love, like you're dating, so you fall in love, and you're with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, they're there and you're here, right? But you're experiencing something, aren't you? I mean, you stand next to a lot of people in life, you don't experience something necessarily. But next to someone you love, there's like an experience of their goodness and their affection for you. And you can also have that experience with God. That's what we're all praying. Some of you have already had that experience. Some of you may not really understand what I'm talking about, but God will give you that gift. So, faith is a belief in God based on evidence that you ponder. But at a certain point, you also have to say, help me believe. Someone said, I don't believe in God. How do I believe in God? You say, well, you have to ask God to help you believe. No, you don't understand. I don't believe in God. So I can't ask him to help me believe if I don't believe he's out there. I know. But the only way you can get to believe is if you ask him to help you believe. So you have to say, God, I'm not sure you exist. But if you do, can you help me believe in you? That's a good prayer. That's a great prayer. God gets it. Like, there's a passage in the scripture where Jesus encounters someone, and the man is asking for certain help. And the man says, Jesus, I do believe in you, but help my unbelief. Increase my belief. Help me grow in faith. Faith is a gift from God, but he wants you to ask for that gift. So, in your personal prayers, always say, Jesus, I'm trying to believe in you. I think I believe in you, but deepen my belief. Help me to know you better. God, I think you're out there. Jesus said you're my Father. Somehow you have affection for me. Help me believe. Become more real to me. That's a great prayer. Bring your questions, your uncertainty to God. He can handle it. What? You're the one guy out of 8 billion down there that doesn't believe me. What's your problem? No, a lot of people. Only 2.4 billion believe that Jesus is God. That means 5 billion like off base. They don't get it. God doesn't hate them for that. He's hoping that they'll get it at some point. There are plenty of people now these days who say they don't even believe there is a God. God doesn't hate them either, but he hopes that one day they'll get it, right? So all of us just have to say, I'm trying to understand. Help me to know you. Be more real to me. That's a great prayer. I do believe, help me believe. So faith, again, based on evidence, but at a certain point you got to ask for the gift. And you got to pray. And in prayer, you'll start to experience it, and it will become real. And someone said, the greatest proofs of the Catholic faith, or Christianity in general, but Catholicism in particular, it's not all the teachings, right? There's a lot of really fascinating teachings and pretty convincing. But it doesn't necessarily prove anything. They said two of the greatest proofs are the beauty that comes out of Christianity. People who have Christian faith produce great works of music, great works of painting, great works of sculpture, great works of architecture, great acts of charity. There's a beauty that comes out of Christianity, a goodness that comes out that you can't really fake. Someone say, I can believe, be like, well, I don't see it, right? But once you start seeing it, you see like the goodness that comes out of it. If you look at communism, if you went to Russia, the Soviet Union, in the 1970s, you wouldn't have seen very nice architecture. Square buildings. It was the opposite of beauty. But if you look at like towns in Europe that used to be very fervently Christian, you see magnificent cathedrals in the center of town. And you go in and you see magnificent paintings and sculptures. And if you listen to the music that was composed, beautiful symphonies and works of music. I was in Rome for 5 years as a seminarian, which was a great gift. And I remember I was in a church praying, and I saw an American couple come in. And they're looking around at the art and taking some pictures. And the wife said, "Pah, these paintings shouldn't be in this cold, damp church. They should be in a museum being preserved and environmentally controlled atmospheres. This is kind of a waste." Right? Those paintings were painted precisely to be in a church so that people would meditate on the goodness and the beauty of God. They would never have made the paintings to put them in a museum. They weren't made to be in a museum. They're real acts of faith and love to help other people believe and love. So one evidence of Christianity, goodness and truth, is that the beauty it engenders. And the other proof is the saints. Those Christians that embrace what Jesus taught fully and believe it and really try to live it completely, they're amazing people. We admire them. Like, I wish I was like that. Who just give their life away in serving others in great acts of charity and generosity. And they'll give up marriage, they'll give up their money, they'll give up their career, they'll literally work themselves to death in service of other people. They'll become missionaries. They'll become martyrs. Like, Jesus is all they care about, and they'll be willing to die for Jesus. You can't fake that. So if you look at 2,000 years of Christianity, there's so many fascinating Christians who've lived. So we're going to talk about saints, right? Sometimes like people, they overcomplicate the saints. You're just like, these are just amazing Christians. And we should read about them because you'll be inspired to be an amazing Christian yourself. Like, it can be done. People have done it before you. We have our sports stars or our actors or actresses that we like or musicians, fine. But you should also have like who are your 5 favorite Christians, right? You should be ready to say that, right? You should have your top 5 list. And you probably should have some pictures up on your walls or statues of them because they're pretty amazing people. And once you start learning about their lives, like, dang, you can't fake that. Like, it works. It's interesting, if you look at like modern philosophers, a lot of modern philosophers, a significant number, ended up committing suicide. That's a good indication that their philosophy was flawed. Their understanding of life wasn't correct. It didn't lead them to have a good life and be joyful and hopeful and cheerful, but rather it was destructive. Like, it didn't work. You can see in Christianity that it works, right? Are there plenty of bad Christians? Yes, there are, of course. But there's plenty of bad Muslims and there's plenty of bad atheists. The bad Christians aren't surprising. The world around us is very bad. It's the good Christians that are surprising. Wow. Like, for those who actually live it and believe it, they live wonderful lives. So that's, again, like, as we're going to go through each week, we're going to talk about a saint, some great Christian. When we say they're a saint, that just simply means they're in heaven. We hope that there's billions and billions of people in heaven. But sometimes God reveals that someone's up there, because after they die and people ask for their intercession, miracles happen. And we'll get into that as a future topic. But a saint is simply someone who's in heaven. We believe there are certain people up there, we know they're there. Billions of people are up there that we don't know about. But some we know are up there, because God has kind of revealed it to us. But the reason they're up there is because they love God intensely down here and led wonderful lives. So, again, just kind of, where do we get our faith from? What is it based upon? Ideas, yes, but also the experience of Christians around us. Another thing I want to say is, a lot of times people today come to me, especially young people, and they say, Father, I have a lot of doubts. I feel like I have a lot of doubts about, I'm not sure if there's a God. And I said, okay, but do you believe in Jesus? They go, yeah. There's a guy named Jesus, right? Born in Bethlehem, his mother was Mary, grew up in Nazareth, had 12 friends, apostles, performed miracles, died in Jerusalem. Yeah. So you believe in Jesus, yeah. Came back to life. Yeah. And then you believe in God. Jesus is God. Like, God seems like this abstract, vague notion out there somewhere. I don't really understand God. Either do I. I mean, like, he's infinite, he's eternal, he's outside of time. He made the volcano that erupted in Hawaii. He made the Tyrannosaurus Rex. He made the flowers. Like, he's kind of hard to get your mind around, right? Jesus proved that there's a God because he was God. Like, we know a lot about Jesus. And how do we know about Jesus? Because of those 16 pages of Mark's gospel, right? The story of his life. What did he say and what did he do? The neat thing is we have 4 stories of his life. 4 of his friends wrote down what he said and did. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have 4 biographies. But they didn't just write down what he said. They wrote down what he did. He brought a dead guy back to life. He cured a leper. He cured a guy who was paralyzed. This guy was possessed and Jesus kicked the devil out of the guy. It was an exorcism. Jesus walked on the water. It was crazy. But the kicker was Jesus died. I saw him down on the cross, and 3 days later he came back to life. 4 different people wrote down those facts. That's a lot of evidence, isn't it? Sounds crazy, but... So, that's why it's so important to question Jesus. Get into the life of Jesus. What did he say and what did he do? I hope you read all 4 Gospels. That's like 100 pages. Still not a lot of pages, right? But when you're feeling it seems confusing and vague and I'm not sure about all this, just keep going back to Jesus. Do you believe in Jesus? And if you're not sure, then read the story again. Get it into your head. And then of course I believe. All right, good. Get you back on track. That make sense? So faith, there's a lot more that we could say about it. We don't have time. So prayer. Now the last section, if you look at this book, the table of contents, it's like the 4th or 5th page. It's actually not numbered because it's the table of contents. It breaks down into 3 parts. This book is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the theology, what Catholics believe. The second part is morality, how Catholics live. And the third part is sacraments and prayer, how Catholics worship, how Catholics pray. That's important too. Like, Catholicism is not just a set of ideas. We got Buddhist ideas, Hindu ideas, Muslim ideas. No. It is a set of ideas, but it's more than that. It's a way of life. Those ideas inform how we live. So, what we believe, section 1, but section 2, how we live, morality, what is right and wrong? What are good things to do, what are bad things to do? How should we treat God, how should we treat each other? It's a way of living. There's a Christian way of living. And then third, part 3, there's a Christian way of praying. How do you pray? Personal prayer, and then what are the sacraments? These new prayers that Jesus taught. He taught us 7 sacraments, 7 new ways of praying. We're going to get into those week by week. But prayer. So, what is prayer? This whole section, part 3, goes over prayer. If you look at chapter 9, page 375, that's when it gets more into like personal prayer. Chapter 9, 10, and 11. I presume that you pray in some way. Most of us have our own types of prayer. I will say this at the beginning of this process. Pray more and pray better. And I don't know how you're praying. But for most of us, we can pray more and we can pray better. Prayer is conversation and friendship with God. We can always go deeper until we get to heaven. So I think it's a safe bet to say we can say, pray more and pray better. A young girl said to her mother, and her mom told me, she said, if God already knows what I want, then why should I pray to him? That's an interesting question. If God already knows everything, then why should you ask him for stuff? So I said to the mother, is that all your daughter does when she prays? It's like she asks God for stuff. I want this and this and this and this. Christmas is coming and this is what I want, this and this and this and this. That's not that's part of prayer, but hopefully that's not the only way you talk to God. Is that the only way you talk to your wife? Hey honey, I want this and this and this and this and this. I'll see you tomorrow. Or your brother or sister, hey Jane, yeah, I want this and this and this and this. See ya. No, that's ridiculous, right? You say, hello, how are you doing? It's good to see you. Let's talk to each other for a while. Let's meet up for a beer. Let's meet for a sandwich. Let's go out for a coffee and catch up. It's just good to be with you. I enjoy your presence. Well, that's prayer with God, right? God, I should spend some time with you every day. I should hang out for a little while with you because you're God and you're real. And Jesus said, you want to hang out with me. Can't understand why, but if you do, then I guess I should hang out with you. So prayer is saying, I love you, God, but deepen my love. I believe in you, God, but deepen my belief. Right? So I love you, God. That's a type of prayer. A second type of prayer is, thank you, God. What happened today? Well, Father Diaz gave this amazing talk on faith. I've never heard anything like it before. Thank you. Did you have a good lunch today? Did you have a good conversation with your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend? Did you accomplish something at work today? Did you listen to a nice song on the radio? Did your soccer team win in the World Cup? Like, what are some good things that happened today, whatever they were for each of you, and tonight for you to go to bed, just say, thank you for this and this and this and this. So God, I love you, deepen my love. Thank you, Lord. I'm sorry, Lord. What are the times today I wasn't very generous? Maybe I sinned very specifically in a serious way. Maybe there was something very specific I did. Or maybe I just didn't interact with my spouse well, or my children, or my coworkers. I wasn't a good example. Or I was lazy at work. Or I cut someone off on the highway. Or I cussed at someone who cut me off on the highway. Or I looked at something on the computer I shouldn't have. Just examine your day. First, look at the good things. Enjoy the good things. Tell them thank you. But then, tell them sorry for the times you sinned today. And then maybe finally, you can ask him for stuff. Help me with this. Help me with that. But also, not just me. Help the other people around me, Lord. Someone at work I found out is sick. Help them. I saw on the news there was this accident. Help those people. My wife's going through a difficult time. Help her. So help us, Lord. So I love you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Help us. That's a good prayer. That make sense? What I have to give you to pass out is a little prayer. Don't be intimidated by it. Some of this you're probably already doing. Some of it you're not. You don't have to have this down pat by next week. But there probably is a certain baseline of personal prayer that we should all be doing. Like that's a good question. Like how often should I pray? How long? If the day is 24 hours, how long should I pray? It's kind of the question of how often should I go to church? The Catholics, we pray Mass, right? That hour-long prayer. Mass is one prayer, just a long prayer. It takes about an hour. How often should I go to Mass? That's an interesting question. Some people think, well, maybe once a year. That's not bad. It's Jesus' birthday. Maybe I should go to Mass once a year. That's a fair question. Is once a year sufficient, or is it once every 10 years? Or should I go every day? Like, maybe I should go every day. Like, how often should I go? Well, the third commandment says, keep holy the Sabbath day. At least go once a week. I didn't make that up. Right? Pope Francis didn't make that up. Jesus didn't make that up. Who gave us the Ten Commandments? Anyone remember who gave the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament?
God.
Well, God gave them, but who did he give them to? He didn't tell Moses. Moses. Anyone know how long ago Moses lived? 3,300 years ago. God said, go to church once a week. 3,300 years ago. Like, all right, that answers that question. All right, well, how about my personal prayer? How many hours a day should I pray? How often should I pray? That's the next question, right? Well, I would say 3 times a day. Why do I say that? Well, we kind of do things 3 times a day. We eat 3 times a day. Most of us, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's kind of a rhythm. Our body wants to be fed 3 times a day. It wants nourishment 3 times a day. So it kind of makes sense that perhaps our soul also wants to be nourished 3 times a day. You may say, I'm not sure that's true. Okay, I'm making the claim that it is true. But if you look at the prayer, the basic thing is, if there is a God, just keep reconnecting with him. Just acknowledge his presence. Another way of thinking of prayer is acknowledging the presence of God. It's like saying there is a God and he's here. So start the day with God, just like a little short prayer. God, I give this day to you, help me. At the end of the day, say, how did it go? Look back. A little examination. I love you, God. Thank you. I'm sorry. Help me. And sometime during the middle of the day, maybe carve out 10 minutes for a little more substantial prayer. Listening to God, talking to God. Maybe use a passage from the Bible to kind of help focus you so you're not distracted. We call that Lectio Divina. We'll learn more about that as we go along. There's a little explanation of it there. The Catholic Church picks a gospel passage every day of the year to reflect on. So you don't have to be creative. You can just use the gospel passage the church picked. You can get it on phone apps. I list a few apps there. And just use that as your point of reflection. Just introducing that concept to you today. Don't be intimidated by it. We'll talk about it more as we go along. But this is kind of a start the day with God, end the day with God, and somewhere in the middle, carve out a few minutes to spend with God. You'll learn how to do this. You'll grow deeper. Some of you are already doing it. But I really encourage you to try to build up this habit of prayer.